Hello and welcome to This Really Happened, a place where unbelievable, heart-touching true stories come to life. Sometimes surprising, sometimes bittersweet, always real. Grab a drink and settle in. We're about to begin. Sarah Miller's heart wasn't set on cultivating the land, but neither did the 600 square meters of the Dacha plot repel her. She was blessed with an accommodating nature, especially when it came to the interests of her loved ones. Generally, the Dacha was her mother's passion, but since Sally adored her mother immensely, she had long learned to find charm in trips to their family retreat. It was good that the dacha was located quite close to their home. If you walked without extra luggage, you could easily get there in half an hour. And for instance, on summer weekends in the cool morning hours, such a walk was even pleasant. However, making swift transitions wasn't necessary. Public transport came to the rescue. An incredibly long bus route connecting the railway station with a large factory almost on the city's border ran past the dacha area. Such proximity turned out to be very fortunate, as in a sense, the modest plot became a real salvation in the past years, marked by particular harshness for the entire country and their family in particular. Whether it was a coincidence or if the mother's quarrel with the father was a consequence of the events happening, the man filed for divorce. All his numerous relatives, who had often visited them before for various reasons, and much more often for none, seemed to have completely forgotten the path to the hospitable apartment of Sarah's family and her grandparents. The girl once overheard the adults' conversation and realized that her father hadn't just kept the car and garage for himself, but also craved a share of other property. Only he didn't succeed. Both the dacha and the apartment were allocated to the grandmother, so after the divorce, the insatiable former relative didn't get a single inch. The offended man paid tiny alimony and didn't seek meetings with Sally, erasing her from his life as if he had never had a daughter. The girl's heart ached with pain, sometimes to the point of tears. But the girl understood that her crying upset her loved ones, so she carefully hid her sorrow. The family, reduced in number to Sally, her mother, her grandmother Betty, and her grandfather Bill, had to live on. Visiting the family retreat and battling for the harvest became, perhaps, the most effective means against adversity. On the 600 square meters, they grew potatoes, cucumbers, and carrots. Since there was no longer a car, transporting the harvest would have been much more difficult without the bus. But this way, they brought home even tomatoes, which didn't always ripen red in the fleeting summer heat. Green fruits, after ordinary kitchen processing, turned into a wonderful salad that brought variety to their modest meals. Under the guidance of Grandmother Betty and her mother, Sally Pye, who was still tiny in those years, grated carrots needed for recipes and hummed a simple, unpretentious tune about an evergreen tomato and the magical land of Limonia. Remembering the past, the woman was surprised by the optimism of the adults in her family. They showed it even in the most hopeless hours. Soon after Sally's father separated from her mother, a time so cheerless arrived when there was no money in the house at all. The father, including the alimony completely, disappeared from his daughter's life. A few years after the divorce, the grandmother, grandfather, and mother all worked at the same factory, and there, as luck would have it, wages were severely delayed, very severely. After a few months, the money from their modest savings melted away. Sally understood that her relatives were trying to shield her from excessive immersion in the world of adult worries. However, it was impossible not to notice that store-bought sweets and even her favourite cheap sausage, which curled into a strange funnel when boiled, hardly ever appeared on the table. Striving to be useful, Sally ran around the unsightly corners of the district, collecting bottles in a bag sewn by her grandmother. Then the girl washed her finds, because they paid a little more for clean glass containers at the collection point, and bought bread or other essential products for the house. A short period saw problems with transport. Buses stopped adhering to the schedule because their number on the route was significantly reduced. As a result, squeezing into the cramped cabin with bags became practically impossible. And Grandfather Bill constructed 2 carts, convenient and maneuverable. The man usually transported the larger capacity bags himself. And when for some reason he couldn't go to the dacha, he would invariably warn, "Girls, when you walk home from the retreat, don't overload the cart. Take care of yourselves from bruises." There was something deeply touching and tender in this. The smaller cart was usually managed by Sally's mother, and when the load wasn't too heavy, she entrusted it to her daughter. So together, supporting and pitying each other, they overcame all adversities. By the time she received her passport, Sally harboured resentment towards almost the entire male gender, and taking her mother's maiden name, became Miller after her grandfather. He alone was the only true support in their small family. Inventive, optimistic, viewing the most difficult situations with humour, Grandfather Bill managed to always do everything and never once reproached his daughter Mary for not saving her marriage with her husband. Sally had recently often thought about the fact that her parents separated when her mother was practically the same age as she was now. In some ways, their fates were similar. Sarah's marriage also crumbled, like a sandcastle under the onslaught of waves crashing on the shore. However, she and her husband Mark had no children. At first, by mutual agreement, although Sally was already 26, they decided to live for themselves. Then suddenly, Mark became completely absorbed in his career race, and it happened that he, successful and driven, was intercepted by a colleague of his, just as energetic and tenacious. 3 years of a calm and outwardly prosperous marriage proved powerless against a sudden infatuation. However, Sally didn't see this turn of fate as a tragedy. Almost 2 years had passed since the quite civilized divorce, and hardly even a slight regret remained. Sally's mother had a much harder time. A child, even one approaching the difficult threshold of adolescence, had to be raised, clothed and fed, and the times were troubled. Although it was tough back then, Sally's memories of the first 15 years of her life still often had a bright tinge of sadness. Indeed, Grandmother Betty and Grandfather Bill were alive then. Their family coped with hardships together. Now, financially, things were much easier, and it was unbearably bitter for Sally that they didn't see that both their daughter and granddaughter were living quite well, that they were living excellently there. However, sometimes it seemed to her, especially at the dacha, that both her grandmother and grandfather were very near. As if any moment, from somewhere beside the little house, the grandmother's gentle voice would be heard. "Sally Pie, run here. The raspberries are ripe. Come and have a treat." Or grandfather, smiling with the look of a victor, would enter through the gate, showing a stringer heavy with caught fish, and asking his wife, daughter and granddaughter, "Well, my ladies, what would you like for dinner today? Shall I boil fish soup, or would you prefer fried?" Oh, how many pleasant things were connected with the family retreat. Now, the dacha had partly lost its significance as a provider. The potato patch had shrunk to a few bushes, just enough to traditionally taste young boiled tubers with dill, and gave way to a kingdom of flowers. Of course, there was still space for tomatoes and cucumbers. But mostly now, the main harvest consisted of fruits and berries. However, the most important thing was that on the small plot, where probably every handful of earth was familiar, peace easily reigned, mixed with a slight sadness. Sally's mother also enjoyed going to the dacha, but for 2 weeks now, the woman had gone to a sanatorium at her daughter's insistence. The hardships she endured in her youth had taken their toll. Yesterday, on the phone, her mother asked her to pick berries, water the plants, and deal with the weeds that had surely grown. And Sally didn't hesitate to set aside the second half of Wednesday to go to the dacha. She took time off work early, as there was nothing urgent, and set off. Sally picked the currants, cleared the cultivated plants of weeds, watered the plants, and filled the watering cans. Having gotten tired, she had a snack on a bun she had thoughtfully brought, and made berry juice, the best remedy against heat and fatigue, far superior to sweet soft drinks. She lay down for a short rest and, without noticing it herself, fell asleep. The awakening was sudden. The transition of summer twilight into the velvet of night is, of course, a pleasant moment, but only if there is time to truly enjoy it. This luxury was unavailable to the woman. The clock on her smartphone screen mockingly reminded her that she had to hurry, otherwise the last scheduled bus would leave for home without her. In that case, she would either have to walk at a time that wasn't very suitable for it, or spend the night at the dacha and rush home on the morning bus, leaving the harvested crop there and flying to work on the wings of duty. Sally quickly packed the harvested crop into her bag and hurried to the bus stop. The woman was rushing and, seeing the thin figure of a girl perched on a flower bed made from an old tire near one of the plots, she walked past. Sarah took a few steps, but a vague premonition prevented her from going further. A child of primary school age had no place being alone on the street. Sarah had known the Henderson couple, the owners of this plot, since they purchased it. So she could say for sure that she had never seen this little girl with them before. Of course, the girl might have been brought as a guest and simply gone out for a walk. But the dark voids of the Hendersons' cottage windows unequivocally indicated its emptiness. Either everyone was asleep in there, having forgotten about the little guest who had gone for a walk. The second assumption seemed absurd, meaning she was unlikely to be related to the owners of the plot she was sitting near. Even in the meagre light of the street lamps dispelling the darkness in the dacha area, the girl's pathetic appearance indicated that she was in a difficult life situation. Of course, Sally became anxious. Maybe this supposedly chance meeting was part of some scam. Just recently, on her way home from work, she had read a story online about a man who, due to his kind heart, had almost fallen into a quagmire of problems and only by a miracle escaped a trap set by criminals. No! The woman decisively dismissed suspicions of the girl's involvement in fraud. Of course, the possibility of a criminal undertone to her appearance in the dacha area remained, and Sarah's sensitive intuition literally screamed, "This little stranger needs help." Mentally chiding herself for excessive curiosity and interfering in other people's affairs, the woman turned around and asked, "Are you waiting for someone or are you lost?" The girl flinched and spoke rapidly. "Excuse me, but I need help. I got on the bus. The crowd was incredible. I wanted to pay for my fare, but my wallet wasn't in my bag. My school bus pass was in there, and money. Even my phone was taken. It's a simple button phone, but it's still annoying. I tried to explain to the conductor that it was probably stolen. They took everything valuable I had. She got furious and told me to walk. So I'm walking here. I turned into the dacha area to wait out the heat. I tried to ask for money, but no one is giving any." Sally sat down beside her on the tire and clarified, "Where are you heading?" Judging by the address the girl gave, she needed, like Sarah herself, to catch the bus going towards the city centre. The woman didn't hesitate for long and ordered, "Then let's hurry. I'll pay for your fare." The girl was immensely happy, and taking one of the bags of berries to help, didn't stop repeating words of gratitude on the way to the bus stop. Soon, the woman and the girl were sitting in the stuffy bus cabin, and the stranger asked, "Could you please give me your phone number? I'll remember it and then I'll return everything to you." Sarah looked more closely at her companion. Her initial thought that the girl was about 7 years old was mistaken. By her thoughtfulness and the way she constructed sentences, she seemed clearly older. The woman smiled. "Don't worry, I won't become poorer from one ticket. By the way, what's your name?" The girl introduced herself. "Olivia, Liv." "It's very nice to meet you. Well, I'm Sarah. There, we've met. Listen, maybe you need to let your family know you're okay. Are you going home?" Liv's face clouded over and she admitted, "Thank you, but I don't remember my mum's phone number by heart." The woman noticed that her companion, apparently tired from the day's events, kept drifting off to sleep and then surfacing from its sweet captivity, and she offered her shoulder. "Don't be shy, rest. I'll wake you up before your stop." The girl, desperately stifling a yawn, asked again, "Do you have to go even further?" Sarah nodded. She didn't want to embarrass the girl by explaining that she had decided to escort her all the way home and hand her over to her family. The district Liv was heading to was too questionable, although it was considered central. Old houses, sunk into the ground, stood next to newly built high-rises, and residents, according to media reports, were being relocated to areas described as wonderful. The townsfolk, of course, understood that the former inhabitants of the centre were ending up almost on the outskirts, and the most defiant were being pushed towards unfavourable relocation by supposedly accidental, unfavourable circumstances. Wooden houses flared up like matches, clearing space and minimising developers' costs. Sometimes, driving past, Sally noticed that many buildings stood empty or were likely shelters for antisocial elements and various riffraff. Of course, the woman was anxious, but at such a late hour it was completely unwise for a girl to walk the streets of this district alone. Liv trustingly leaned her head on her unexpected patron's shoulder. Driving past her own stop, Sarah sighed, realizing that because of this kind impulse, she wouldn't be home any time soon. And, sending her mother a text message wishing her good night, she became lost in thoughts about everything and nothing. Thoughts about work were replaced by reflections on the need to sort out her personal life, and then shifted to worries that by Friday, with the heat setting in, the plants at the dacha would suffer. Finally, the bus brought them to the right stop, and after a short walk along the almost unlit street, the girl stopped at a dilapidated little house. The girl hadn't even had time to take out her key when the door swung wide open. A woman in a stretched-out tank top and tight cycling shorts came out onto the threshold and started shouting at the top of her voice. "What on earth are you doing, Olivia? Where's the money your father gave you? I called him, and I know you left him, and I already thought you'd hit the jackpot and run off. I was already thinking of reporting you missing." Behind the shouting woman appeared thin children. A girl about Liv's age, a slightly younger boy, and a tiny little girl who was crawling after the older ones. Liv started to explain, stumbling over her words, the situation she had found herself in. And Sarah froze, unable to utter a word or even move. The stunned woman wanted to turn around and walk away. Her legs seemed to be rooted to the asphalt. The woman scolding Liv was perfectly familiar to Sally. It was her former best friend, and for many years now, her sworn enemy, Lisa Smith. Many years ago, she had separated her from David, her first strong love. Now, from the perspective of her age, the woman understood that she shouldn't have revealed all her personal secrets to Lisa. But back then, at barely 16, she believed in the inviolability of friendship and was also too shy to discuss overly frank topics with her mother and grandmother. Lisa learned from Sally herself that David insisted on intimacy, arguing that they would surely get married as soon as his beloved girl turned 18. So what difference did it make when they became intimate? Sally was almost ready to agree. The guy's arguments seemed quite convincing, and the girl was ready to disregard all the moral principles instilled in her by her elders. She constantly, either aloud or mentally, hummed a naive popular song about a plane in love, for the words of this simple hit so accurately described her story. "I love you, David," Sally repeated after the vocalist again and again. The girl wanted the guy to have no doubt about the sincerity of her feelings. The hitch lay only in her desire to make the first time special and the girl's too long preparation for such an important moment. Only it turned out that while she was in doubt and making plans, Lisa acted swiftly. As a result, David, who arrived for their date slightly embarrassed, announced the breakup to Sally. "Understand, it's not about you. You're a wonderful person, and you'll surely find your happiness." He said something else in the same vein, but the girl seemed not to hear him at all, and then she turned and ran, not looking where she was going, not noticing the puddles. Of course, Sally rushed to Lisa with her trouble, hoping for support and perhaps even advice on how to win the guy back. But instead of words of comfort, she heard the cruel, merciless truth. "Sally, dear, Davy and I are together now. It just happened that I'm expecting his baby. Just don't be upset, okay?" After such an announcement, it was as if all of Sarah's upbringing instantly evaporated. She would later hardly be able, even if she wanted to recall a tenth of what she unleashed on her friend, who at that very moment ceased to be a friend. However, simply forgetting the people who stabbed her in the back like a terrible nightmare was the only thing she dreamed of. Fortunately, David's father was a military man. Thanks to this, the betrayers didn't linger in Sally's sight for long, with a noticeable belly already on the once slender figure. Lisa left following the guy who became her lawful husband. Sally went on with her life, trying not to think about the arrogant betrayer and the cunning friend anymore. For a long time, she kept men at a distance. With the fair sex, besides her mother and grandmother, she communicated dryly, strictly on business. Sarah calculated 15 years had passed since that bitter year of 1997 for her. That's how long she hadn't seen either Lisa or David, and deliberately steered the conversation away when any mutual acquaintances brought them up. Lisa's mother, Aunt Kathy, accidentally bumping into Sally on the street, once tried to talk. However, the proud girl replied that she had to run. Aunt Kathy later, according to rumours, moved to her daughter, but Sarah didn't care as long as she never saw or heard about those who had betrayed her again. The girl suffered, experiencing everything deeply inside, and only her future husband, Mark, managed to slightly melt the ice in her heart. He won her over with his politeness, care, and ability to converse on various topics. Sarah responded to his courtship, but she herself understood that the emergence of sympathy was also influenced by the fear of remaining alone, an old maid. It was no joke, almost a decade had passed since the betrayal. Sally married Mark, probably only because he was the complete opposite of David, both in appearance and character. But their life together still didn't work out. Sarah wanted to quietly slip away, but suddenly Lisa shifted her attention from the nearly crying Liv to her and exclaimed just as loudly, though with obvious joy, "Sal, damn it! Exactly, Sal, it's you! I was looking like, yes, like, no, well, I'll be. You're a well done. You've hardly changed. Only your eyes look a bit tired. Why are you standing on the doorstep like a stranger? Come in." Barely bumping into Liv, who was standing in front of Sarah, Lisa grabbed her old acquaintance by the wrist, as she had bags in her hands, and pulled her inside. Come in quickly. Let's sit down, let's chat. We haven't seen each other in so many years. As you can see, I already have 4 children. How are you doing?" Sarah was shocked because she suddenly realized Lisa wasn't bothered by even a shadow of shame for what had happened between them in the past. "Why are you staring?" the hostess snapped at her older children. "Max, take Alice to the nursery and put her in the playpen. Sue, Liv, quickly to the kitchen. Quickly peel the potatoes, put the water on the fire. I'll talk to you later, Olivia. You'll answer for the money you messed up. Look at that. I sent you out like an adult on such an important task, and you ruined everything. So now you'll sit on potatoes and pasta." No matter how Sarah tried to explain to her sworn enemy that she didn't have time, that she had to go home, her words seemed not to reach Lisa. As soon as the peeled tubers were in the boiling water, the mother snapped at the older ones. "All right, get out of here. Sit in the nursery, and not a sound should come from there. Don't interrupt Sal and me talking." "There," Lisa turned to her guest. 4 children, and I have to be a commander, otherwise there'll be no peace from them. They're also of different ages, on top of everything. Sue's 14, Olivia's 12, Maxie's 5, and Alice will be 2 soon. They all need different supervision. The atmosphere in the kitchen was far from pleasant and not conducive to conversation. Although Sally wasn't a spoiled young lady and could easily make do in a much smaller space, here she felt terribly uncomfortable. Dirty dishes were piled up in the sink and on the table. A sourish smell evoked unpleasant associations with an overflowing trash can, which seemed to be somewhere in the kitchen. Catching her unexpected guest's gaze, the hostess explained, "The neighbouring construction damaged the water pipe, so I'm waiting for them to fix it. Then I'll make Sue and Liv wash everything. But to cook and wash hands, we carry water from the pump on the next street." As if hypnotized, Sally sat on the uncomfortable stool and looked at Lisa, not understanding how she had turned from a real beauty into a coarse, vulgar woman of the most common kind. The woman laughed loudly, throwing her head back, and gushed, "Oh, Sal, you should thank me until your dying day for saving you from such a gift as Davy. I thought his father was a military man. He'd retire soon with years of service. They'd give him an apartment, and we'd settle down somewhere in a good city. Oh, everything was so neat in my plans." But Dimka managed to quarrel fiercely with his father. As a result, with a baby, Sue wasn't even 6 months old when we ended up in a rented room. Demarik got nervous, started drinking, even cheated. What can I say? We rushed into starting a family with him. We were completely green. In bed, he was still okay, somehow normal, but there was nothing to talk about. Dimka even seemed to look at me with contempt, first with hints, and then he started openly declaring that I had shamelessly trapped him, tied him hand and foot, as if he were a dog on a leash, dragged wherever you pull. Utterly surprised, Sarah didn't even know what to say to such revelations. But Lisa, it seemed, just needed to talk. She continued her speech, not noticing that her guest was completely uncomfortable listening to her. Anyway, quite soon, out of boredom, and partly for revenge, I won't deny it, I started having fun with the neighbour. Everything seemed to be going smoothly, and then somehow we got caught. Dimmerik got nervous, started throwing punches at me. My lover, as soon as he smelled trouble, bolted out of the room so fast his heels were flashing. David filed for divorce, and I didn't object. He turned out not to be so good after all. All I could get from him was alimony. He has to pay for both Sue and Olivia, who was supposedly conceived during our marriage. Honestly, I don't even know who she is. As luck would have it, there were temporary problems with the card. I sent that idiot out for cash. She messed it up and even lost her phone. Maxie and Alice are from my current husband, but he's almost kicked the bucket, doesn't show up at home for days. When he does come, there's little joy either. But they promise to give us a new apartment soon. We moved here recently, as if following Dimka, to get all sorts of extra bonuses besides alimony. He's well set up, the scoundrel, found himself a woman who got him a cushy job. The official salary is peanuts, true, but a great sum in cash every month makes him happy. I know this for sure, because an acquaintance works at the same company. Anyway, Dimasic isn't exactly against helping voluntarily, but he avoids it in every way. So I have to send the girls to him. His brain gets fuzzy when they start begging him. Of course, I rushed, basically gave birth to Sue and Olivia for free. But with Maxie, it worked out perfectly, as if they specially came up with this maternity capital thing for him. It's a pity, of course, that it's not cash in hand, but at least something from a lousy, excuse my language, sheep, at least a tuft of wool. Lisa, looking around, didn't see any other clean dishes besides a tray with a decorative samovar. She quickly moved it directly onto the dirty floor and transferred the boiled potatoes into the makeshift plate. After that, with a practiced, quick movement, she took disposable cups from the cupboard, clearly used many times, and poured a cloudy liquid from a bottle into them. "Don't be squeamish, Sal. This is a drink made by my man. I guarantee the quality. It drinks like water, and you won't have a headache in the morning. We'll have a shot now, and you'll tell me how you live, what you're interested in, where you work. Why is it always about me? Listen, do you have children? By your figure it seems not. But don't delay, I'm only half a year older than you, and you see what a set I have. Well, aren't I a well done?" Without waiting for her guest's answer, Lisa confirmed, "Of course I'm a well done. Don't think I'm boasting. It's just that if you don't praise yourself, you have to, absolutely have to praise yourself. That's it. I made it in time. Look, Sue is almost a bride already, and I'm still quite young. Isn't that cool? And you, Sal, it's time. It's time to have children. Your biological clock is ticking. And before you know it, old age will appear on your doorstep, and you're all alone. So run, find a man, and give birth. And if you want, I'll call David right now and tell him you need help with such a delicate matter. I think he won't refuse. He'll help, and then he won't interfere. The baby will be only yours, without any claims from him. Otherwise, his harpy wife will quickly deal with him. And David isn't stupid enough to ruin a profitable marriage. Well, shall I call?" Sally felt murky inside, from the unsolicited advice, from the questionable offer, and generally from the unwelcome meeting with the arrogant, unscrupulous Lisa. How dare she give advice, living almost like a worthless woman in a veritable pigsty? Sally physically felt like she was suffocating in this environment, and, as if waking from a daze, wanted to tell her former friend everything she thought. However, she was interrupted by Liv's timid voice from behind her. "Mum, can I put aside some potatoes for us? Max is asking for food, and I haven't eaten anything substantial since morning." Sarah got up from the stool, freeing up the space. "Thank you for the offer, Lisa, but I really must go. Besides, your children probably need to go to bed." Lisa was clearly displeased that her second daughter had interrupted their chat. Sally noticed that her former friend was barely refraining from swearing. By the door stood the bags with the harvested dacha crop. Feeling a strange sense of pity, Sally took out the small bag lying beside her with her keys and wallet and said, "These, Lisa, are vitamins for your children. Goodbye." The woman left her former friend's house and, reaching the next one, leaned against a tree growing on the sidewalk. Memories stirred up like dirty waves, filling her thoughts. How she had hated Lisa and David then, wishing them all the worst. Now, by chance, she was able to see how the betrayer lived, but she felt no joy. She felt sorry primarily for the children, and to be honest, even for David and Lisa, for whom she had once devised the most agonizing punishments. "Sarah!" Liv, who had caught up with her, called out to the woman. "You didn't give me your number. Please, here's a piece of paper and a pen. Write it down for me." Although Sally had no desire to communicate with anyone connected to Lisa, she, tired and emotionally drained, fulfilled the girl's request. Liv smiled, her white teeth flashing in the semi-darkness, and asked, "Can I call you sometimes when I get a phone again?" Sally nodded and advised, "Run home. You've had a difficult day. Eat something and go to bed." The girl waved and ran home. Sally waited until the door closed behind Liv and hurried towards her own place. The late hour left no chance that public transport was still running on the city streets. She should get out of the area filled with construction sites faster and hurry to get to her apartment to finally rest from the unexpected events. Surprisingly, the woman reached home calmly, as if under the wing of a guardian angel, and, after taking a shower, went to bed. Whether it was nervous strain or the prolonged rest at the dacha, sleep was slow to come to Sarah. She counted sheep and used other techniques, but nothing helped. Events from the past surfaced in her memory, mixed together. The woman couldn't understand if Lisa was completely untroubled by her conscience for having once crossed the line of decency. Of course, it was impossible to say how things would have turned out with David, but there was still a chance that they would have been quite happy. Maybe they would have had children. A separate cause for concern was the fact that the betrayers lived in the same city as her. Although it was large, the probability of a chance meeting increased. What possessed me to stay late at the dacha and then notice a sad girl and help her? If I had known beforehand whose daughter Liv was, I would have walked past or just given her money for a ticket. It's true, no good deed goes unpunished. To the accompaniment of such thoughts, stinging, uncomfortable, disturbing, Sally finally fell into a restless sleep. The early summer morning still offered coolness, but judging by everything, the day promised to be hot again. Thanks to the sudden work troubles that piled up, Sarah didn't even remember the meeting the day before. But in the evening, during the traditional phone call with her mother, sadness washed over the woman again. Not immediately, slightly softening the impression of the meeting with her former friend, she told her everything. Mary was categorical. "Daughter, you've grown into a wonderful, merciful person. But remember that when you extend a helping hand, it's important to dodge the kick of gratitude in time. Sally dear, I just beg you, don't feel sorry for that Lisa. She chose her own fate. It's not your fault that she has 4 children now. You left them the berries, and that's enough. No more acts of support from you. Even for the sake of the children, you shouldn't feel sorry for Lisa. They are, of course, innocent, but you need to stay away from such sworn friends for your own happiness. If I understand anything about life, it's unlikely she could have changed for the better. Forget about her and don't remember her. And if she shows up, chase her away with a broom. It's a pity, of course, that you gave her daughter your phone number, but I understand you. You were tired, you were flustered. However, it's nothing. If Lisa is brazen enough to call, you'll block her number, and that's all there is to it. The less you communicate with such people, the better. You can't expect anything good from vile betrayers." Sarah promised her mother that she would under no circumstances respond favourably to Lisa's attempts to reconnect, and she felt a little calmer. In fact, her own conscience, Sally's, was clear. She had helped the girl selflessly, from the heart, and that was that. Possibly, if she had known beforehand that escorting the girl home would lead to a confrontation with her former friend, she would have parted ways with the girl, by the way, at the street corner and just watched her go inside. However, things happened as they did, and that meant there was no need to speculate about how it would have been if only. Moreover, this act did not impose any responsibility for Lisa's children on her. She, Sally, was not an angel, not a saint, and not a blessed one. She certainly wouldn't be able to graciously forgive a betrayal, even one from 15 years ago. To take revenge, of course, she didn't intend to either. There was no need to dirty her hands or conscience, and it had healed, to be honest. At first, the pain was so great that she could barely breathe. But she endured, she survived, she rebuilt herself, figuratively pulling herself out from under the rubble of a great and bright love on her part. Now, she had no desire to communicate with dishonest people who had unexpectedly surfaced from the past. Sally's mother returned from the sanatorium, and everything in the small, friendly Miller family returned to normal. The sincere joy of meeting a loved one was mutual. Together, the women celebrated this not too grand but important event at their favourite dasha, and life continued according to the long-established routine. The rest of the summer passed peacefully. For a while, the woman answered calls from unknown numbers with apprehension, fearing to hear Liv's voice, but then this fear also subsided. The golden autumn generously bestowed a harvest of apples, and to Sarah's great joy, neither Lisa nor David appeared on the horizon. With some trepidation, the woman walked past the plot where she had once met the daughter of her sworn enemy, but then this feeling also remained in the past, especially when Sally met Alex. It happened near the bus stop. The man in a simple domestic car slowed down, seeing two women pulling carts too slowly, and offered them a ride. If Mary hadn't felt a little unwell that evening due to the change in weather, leaning towards true autumn, she would surely have found a reason to refuse such kindness. However, Sarah took responsibility for the answer and, thanking the driver for his kindness, helped her mother into the car. By this time, the bags were already in the trunk, carefully placed there by the compassionate man. The driver introduced himself on the way, and even, taking a wrist blood pressure monitor from the glove compartment, offered it to Mary. Just in case, measure your pressure. Maybe it makes sense to stop by a hospital or a pharmacy. The readings were quite acceptable. The man, after asking for the address of his new acquaintances, soon drove Mary and Sally to their building entrance and then helped carry the bags into the apartment. Alex refused the offered tea, but gratefully accepted a bag of apples. In addition, the man asked Sally for her phone number. They started dating, and Al gradually became one of the family in the small female realm. He helped where he could, both at the dasha and in the apartment, although both Mary and Sally tried not to burden him with problems. However, he unhesitatingly rejected their attempts to pay him for the work. What was alarming was that the man was very reserved about himself. Alex described his life in dotted lines, schematically and without details. Born in one of the Soviet republics, then forced to leave it with his family, trained as a car mechanic, got a job, then was called up for compulsory service, served in a hotspot, returned, got married, divorced, no children, works, lives in a rented apartment, but is looking for an apartment on a mortgage. As soon as Alex was asked about his relatives, he would shut down and ask, "Let's," When I'm ready, I'll tell you everything myself." Thus, Sally, unrestricted in her fantasies, decided that Alex had experienced some terrible tragedy in the past that was still painful and difficult for him to remember. Mary felt a slight distrust towards the new acquaintance. He found a common language with her daughter too easily. Alex liked the same music and films as Sally. He could easily finish a sentence she started, and often completely agreed with any opinion she expressed. The man didn't rush things, but at the same time he became more and more firmly established in Sally's life. It got to the point where he drove her to work, brought her home, took her to the dacha and back. At first, Mary accepted the man benevolently, but gradually gratitude for the help was replaced by wariness. Alex seemed too smooth to her, too polite, always neat, without the slightest trace of working in a car service. She had never seen marks on his hands like her ex-husband's, and his desire to constantly control all of Sally's movements caused a burning sense of anxiety. One day, Mary decided to share her suspicions with her daughter. "Sally, dear, listen to me calmly. He's too positive, Alex is. Everything seems smooth and coherent, but think about it. When does he manage to work if he's practically become your personal driver, and on a voluntary basis? Forgive me, but I don't believe in altruism in the modern world at all. Maybe you're secretly giving him money, at least for gas." Sally was even a little offended. "So just like that, for free, just because he likes me, driving me around isn't an option?" After a pause, the young woman tried to soften the sharpness of her words and, as if surprised, admitted, "Actually, I offered Al to cover the expenses, but he flatly refused. I think, Mum, you're just worrying for nothing. Haven't you and I deserved to meet a good, selfless person?" Mary herself wanted to believe in a miracle, but she tried to convince her daughter not to rush into opening her heart completely to Alex. "That's true, you definitely deserve happiness, but don't rush. Think about it calmly yourself. After all, Al shows no details about his life, no emotions about situations in the past or present. When I start asking him questions, he avoids answering or says what we've already heard from him, like an actor who has memorized his role and sticks to it without any improvisation. He hasn't lost his temper once, hasn't said anything unnecessary. Okay, I understand. It might be hard to remember military actions, but why is he so reserved about everything else?" Sally just winced at such complaints. "Mom, you're impossible to please. Remember, about Mark you said he was too talkative, shifty. Al is reserved, taciturn, and again it's not right for you." Mary herself was not happy that she had started such a conversation with her daughter, and certainly didn't expect it to lead to a quarrel that would fracture their understanding, which had previously seemed unshakable. Sarah went to her room, showing that she had no intention of continuing the conversation, and her mother thought, maybe she wasn't entirely objective about Alex. Indeed, was there a chance that he was a man of action and not inclined to chatter about himself? And did her suspicions arise from maternal jealousy? No, Mary decided, I will no longer interfere in my daughter's relationship with her chosen one. However, I will watch him carefully so as not to miss any warning signs. So what if Sally dear is in her 30s? To me, she will always remain my beloved little girl, whom I will always protect. The woman's doubts did not disappear, but now she stopped worrying her daughter with her conjectures. However Mary felt about Alex, she couldn't deny that preparing the dacha for winter would have been much more difficult without his help. The man diligently fulfilled all requests and even made quite reasonable suggestions himself. He clearly had experience with such work. But when asked where he learned all the tricks of dacha management, Al again elegantly dodged the answer. Approximately a week before the New Year's Eve celebration, the man brought a slender fir tree with fluffy short needles to the miller's apartment, explaining, "I thought you grow all sorts of flowers yourselves at the dacha, and it would be silly to give you Dutch equivalents, and this seems more thematic." Sally, placing the fragrant beauty in a free corner, asked, "And what exactly is the need to give flowers today, which are, of course, less impressive than a fir tree?" A hint of offence even sounded in Alex's voice. "What, Sally dear? Don't you remember that today marks exactly 3 months since we met so accidentally, but so happily? It was a very important event for me." Sarah even felt ashamed. "Forgive me, Al. We have a complete rush at the office before the new year, so it completely slipped my mind. You're not offended, are you?" The man smiled and admitted, "Not a bit. I read somewhere that offence is for chambermaids. So, my dear, I'm not even annoyed. In fact, I just wanted to do something nice for you, and since I passed a Christmas tree market on the way, I thought a tree would be perfect." Mary, listening to the conversation between her daughter and her suitor, felt ashamed of her doubts about Alex. He spoke too unconvincingly. Moreover, the man calmly agreed to spend the holiday together with Sally and her mother. Partly, Mary's suspicions that Al was married were dismissed. Could a married man so easily free himself from the obligation of being at home at a set table with relatives? Hardly. On the holiday evening, Alex gave Mary a beautiful shawl in the Pavlov Posad style and presented Sally with perfume. 15 minutes before midnight, the man asked for a little attention and delivered an unusually long speech for him. "Dear Mary Howard and Sarah, in the past year, the most significant event for me was meeting you by chance. I think it was the greatest luck of my entire life. Essentially, it is only thanks to you that I understood what true family support and the warmth of a home hearth mean. I would like Sally to enter the coming year in a new status. Excuse me, I'm nervous." The man cleared his throat and then turned to Sally's mother. "Mary Howard, I ask for your daughter's hand. Believe me, she will have no reason to be dissatisfied with me. Are you not against it?" Mary looked questioningly at her daughter, into her happy eyes that sparkled brighter than the lights on the Christmas tree, and shrugged. "I think, Alex, you should ask her too. No, however she decides, that's how it will be." Alex nodded in agreement with the woman's words, took a small box from his pocket, and opening it, showed it to Sarah. "Allow me to put it on you as a sign of our engagement." Sally smiled timidly, extending her hand to the man. And the touched Mary wiped the corners of her eyes, trying not to smudge her mascara. At the holiday table, Alex began to suggest options for the celebration. "I think it makes sense to choose a wedding date closer to summer. Sit in a cafe and then go relax at your wonderful dasher, Mary Howard, partly thanks to which we met. After that, frankly, I'd go somewhere by the sea for a week or 2. How do you feel about that, Sally? Will you manage to take time off work for vacation in the summer?" Sarah beamed and was already mentally calculating what period to ask her superiors for, and then she suddenly remembered, "Mum, how will you manage the dacha in my absence?" Mary waved her hands. "Don't you worry about that. The dacha should be a pleasure, not a chore. Plan your celebration however it's convenient for you. By the way, Alex, we should probably inform your relatives about such an important event, and it wouldn't hurt to meet them in general." From Alex's sharply darkened face, it was clear that Mary Howard had touched a sore spot, but he replied, "Alas, but I have no one to introduce you to. Forgive me, but this is a somewhat painful topic for me. I'll go get some air on the landing." The man got up from the table, and Sally whispered indignantly to her mother, "Why did you spoil Al's mood? Everything was so wonderful. He probably has some unpleasant memories associated with the loss of loved ones. We already talked about this somehow. Mary began to apologize. Daughter, but I didn't mean to offend Alex. That's it. I won't ask another single question. Don't worry. When Alex returned to the table, he acted as if nothing had happened, and the celebration returned to a pleasant course. A joint decision was made to get married in the spring, in April, and postpone the honeymoon until the velvet season. The days of the new year flew by. Alex even started taking Sally to look at apartments. However, out of the abundance of options, they couldn't find the perfect one. Mary was happy for her daughter, but made another attempt to verify Alex's identity. The man's social media page was boring and devoid of any hints about his relatives. He posted photos of cars he had repaired and shared reposts of contests. The woman didn't notice anything suspicious and calmly began preparing for her daughter's upcoming wedding. One day, Alex, as usual, picked Sally up after work, and the woman noticed that her fiancé was even more taciturn than usual. Observing him from the passenger seat, she saw how the man's brows were furrowed and how his jaw muscles twitched. The atmosphere in the car was tense, and unable to bear it, the woman asked, "Al, what's going on? Did something happen? Can I help in any way?" The man turned off the avenue into a shopping centre parking lot, stopped the car, and turned to Sally. Alex's look was not at all like that of a happy groom preparing to say goodbye to bachelor life. After a pause, he began, "Sally, dear, I have serious problems. Perhaps the wedding will have to be postponed." "They?" Sally asked, frightened. "What happened?" Alex, looking into his fiancée's eyes, shared his problems. "To earn more money, besides my usual garage service, I started working for cash in another place. Well, last night the boxes where cars brought in for repair were kept, to which I had access, and some I even repaired burned down. In short, they decided to blame me for the fire. The amount I have to pay is astronomical. I've already given all my savings, but it's like a drop in the ocean. I spent the whole day running around banks, but with the salary I can show officially, there are no decent offers. They're threatening to cripple me, even find other levers of influence. I'm terribly afraid that you or your mother might suffer because of these bastards." Sarah was shocked. She had seen a report about a fire in the industrial zone on the city's news website, but she couldn't have imagined that this emergency would affect her so closely. The woman made a calming gesture across her fiancé's cheek and tried to say absolutely calmly, "Well, that's not a problem. We won't postpone anything. I'll transfer money from my card to you now so you can pay off at least part of the debt. We'll go file the application exactly on the day we planned, and we'll get married without any crowds or delays. The only thing is, we'll have to sacrifice the entertainment. But that's not scary at all. We can easily do without a banquet and a trip to the sea. Life is long. We'll have time for everything." Alex took Sally's hand and began to cover it with kisses. "Thank you, my dear, for your support. We'll see. Maybe the insurance company will sort it out, and the claims against me will be dropped. Of course, that would be the best option. Well, roughly knowing how this whole insurance business works, they'll most likely refuse to pay, or it will come in a few years. So it's better not to count on that to avoid disappointment." The couple in love sat in the car for a little longer, then Alex drove his fiancée home. He flatly refused to drop in. "Forgive me, my dear. I'm going to one more place now. Maybe I can earn some extra money there. Every penny counts for us now." Sarah smiled encouragingly and, kissing her fiancé, asked, "Al, just don't overwork yourself. We'll get out of this. Don't strain yourself." At home, Sally told her mother about the trouble Alex had gotten into and asked, "What do you think? maybe we should hire a lawyer to at least try to reduce the amount of damage supposedly caused by Al's fault. Mary was shocked. She had been so taught by her father, Sally's grandfather, that a real man tries not to burden the woman close to him with his problems. At the same time, she perfectly understood that the semi-criminal businessman Alex worked for could act by any means, often choosing illegal but the most effective ones. Over the next few days, Alex couldn't see his fiancée, about which he warned her on the phone. "My golden girl, I've been offered a well-paid side job, but I'll have to go out of town, so forgive me. I won't even be able to break away to drive you to work and back." Sally took this with complete understanding. She was glad that the man she loved hadn't despaired, but was trying to get out of the difficult situation. After saying a warm goodbye to Alex, she began to think about how else she could help Al. Taking advantage of a few days' respite, mother and daughter began to raise at least part of the necessary sum. They had bank accounts, and although it wasn't enough, at least the debt would gradually decrease. Having withdrawn the money, the women, observing all precautions, brought it home and began waiting for Al's arrival. The man called a couple of days later, and Sally happily told him that she and her mother had collected another part of the sum. Alex thanked her incessantly, and the woman even thought he was barely holding back tears. "Sally dear, my love, how grateful I am to you and Mary Howard. Most likely I'll be back in the city the day after tomorrow and can finally hug you. There's also an option coming up with selling my car, and if everything goes well, we'll even have a little money left for the holiday table. It won't be as luxurious a banquet as I dreamed of giving you, but still." Only after the call ended did Sally realize how much she missed the man she loved. He had become essential to her, like air. Although it seemed very little time had passed since they met. Seeing that her daughter was still anxious, Mary tried to shift her thoughts to something pleasant. "Listen, I have a wonderful piece of fabric tucked away. Grandmother Betty got it on a special occasion. Let's take a look at it and think about a style for a wedding dress." Sally chuckled. "Mom, I'm not getting married for the first time, you know. I don't necessarily need a white dress." Mary countered. "Well, did I say the fabric was white? It's a simply wonderful turquoise shade, which I think..." With their worries and gentle arguments about the style, the women were somewhat distracted from their unpleasant experiences. After all, when your hands and mind are busy with a creative process, everything else seems to diminish in importance. Mary had gone to the store when Sally's phone unexpectedly received an incoming call from an unknown number. The woman usually declined such calls and did so this time. However, the unknown caller or callers persisted. When the ring sounded again, Sally answered, "Listening." The young voice coming from the speaker was clear, but somehow joyless. "Hello, Sarah. It's Liv, Lisa's daughter. Can we meet somewhere crowded now, so we don't attract unnecessary attention?" Sarah was surprised. She hadn't thought she would ever have to talk to the daughter of her sworn enemy again, and she responded not very kindly. "Maybe you can explain to me on the phone what's going on." The girl's voice turned into a whisper. "I can't say this on the phone. Please, let's meet in a shopping centre somewhere." Sally relented, and soon she and Liv arranged to meet at the food court of the shopping centre closest to the woman's home. Mary, who had returned home, was surprised that her daughter was going somewhere, but didn't question her. In fact, Sally herself couldn't explain what force was pushing her to go to this meeting. She recognized Olivia from afar. The girl was again sitting hunched over, just like on that summer evening, as if burdened by some complex, non-childlike problem. Sally walked over and greeted her. "Hi, Liv. How are you?" The girl looked up and, greeting her in return, blurted out rapidly, "Sarah, well, I don't need to explain for long. Don't give Alex any money. He's a deceiver." The woman was astonished. "Why do you think so?" Sarah's eyes widened. She didn't understand what was happening, and she clarified, "Wait a minute, Liv. How do you know that Al is asking me for money? How do you know him?" The girl looked down and then admitted, "Sarah, well, I'm ashamed to admit it to you, but your meeting with Al was planned and organized by my mom. She's angry with you for some reason, although, as I understand it, it should be the other way around. So Mom decided to profit. She said that life is bad without a sucker, and she involved this Al in carrying out her plan. He's somehow connected to my stepfather Tom, Maxie, and Alice's father. I don't know exactly where they met, maybe in an orphanage, or maybe when he served time as a minor. Anyway, I overheard this cunning scheme yesterday. Al is supposed to trick money out of you and disappear. He's already withdrawn the first part from his card. But they and Tom are generally sure that you'll be too embarrassed to go to the police. How that pig Tom squealed yesterday when Al told him that you had prepared another sum for him. He was telling Al not to rush back, so you wouldn't think he dropped everything and rushed just for the money. I thought all night and half the day whether to tell you about this or not, and now I've decided to tell you. I think you don't deserve such vile treatment. After all, you were the only one who didn't walk past me, who responded to my trouble, who treated me to delicious berries. It's wrong when good people are punished by scoundrels. What happened between my mom and you doesn't concern me. Personally, I didn't experience anything bad. And partly, I even feel guilty for what's happening now, because Mom only glared at you after your meeting." The woman swallowed the lump that suddenly blocked her breath and found the courage to calm the girl. "No, Liv, you are not to blame for anything. For some reason, your mother decided to make me her main enemy, and you are not involved in this action of hers at all. Thank you very much for warning me. Otherwise, I would have ended up in a catastrophic situation, and I would have dragged my mother into it too. You can rest assured, no one will know that I figured out Al with your help. I promise you." Sarah thanked Liv again, and somehow, struggling to comprehend the vileness of her former friend, who harboured resentment for who knows what, she made her way home. Mary immediately understood that something terrible had happened to her daughter. She looked so lost. Sally unemotionally told her everything she had learned about Alex, his involvement in Lisa, and her husband's cunning plan. Mary listened to the shocking information, pressing her palm to her mouth to keep from erupting in perfectly justified curses at the scoundrels. Such treachery was very difficult to believe. When Sarah fell silent, the woman finally couldn't hold back. "What on earth is going on? Why is that nasty Lisa doing this to you? She's been doing nasty things since she was a child and isn't afraid that the boomerang for evil deeds will come back and hit her on the head. Lord, how good it is that Liv crossed your path. Otherwise, if you had accidentally run into Lisa in the city, who would have helped prevent her wicked plan?" Finally crying, Sally clung to her mother and whispered hotly, "You were right in your suspicions, and I was blinded by Al's attention and hoped that here he was, a real, reliable man with whom I could relax, remember my fragility. Even when Mark told me he was leaving me, it didn't hurt this much. At least he honestly admitted that he loved someone else and couldn't live with me. And this swindler wormed his way into our trust for so many months, lulled our vigilance, deceived us. How can I trust people now? And Mum, I don't even feel sorry for the money I immediately gave him when I found out about his supposed problems. I'm terribly hurt that I was so easily fooled. Why am I such a sucker?" Mary, holding her daughter tightly, as she had when she was a child, tried to speak convincingly and calmly. "People with pure souls find it hard to believe that they are surrounded by scoundrels. You're wrong to blame yourself. This Alex was very convincing. Even I fell for his charm. Talent, albeit with a minus sign. Let's think of the money you transferred to him not as his illegal gain, but as fair payment for services for repairing our dacha and apartment. If we look at it from this point of view, we're quite even. So you could say we got off cheap. We learned another lesson. We need to trust our intuition. If there's the slightest suspicion, we need to check all the information more carefully. There were obvious oddities in Al's behaviour, but we chose to ignore them. We should have insisted that he introduce you to his relatives or friends at least. We could have gone to his work, visited the hostel where he lives, talked to his neighbours. Mary's reasoning was interrupted by a call. It was Alex, calling Sarah as was his custom, to wish her good night, say his usual compliments, and declare his love. Only now did the woman understand the true price of these words, all lies. Contrary to habit, she didn't rush to answer the man. She simply didn't know how to live on and what to say to the person who had taken advantage of her trust and intended to completely fleece her. Sally was afraid that Al would recognize her unmasking in her voice. Mary answered instead, "Hello, Al. Sally dear went to the neighbours. She forgot her phone. Can I give her a message?" Alex, as always, was polite and courteous. "Thank you, Mary Howard. If possible, please ask her to call back any time she returns. I'll be waiting. All the best. Goodbye." The woman echoed the man, calling, "Goodbye." The conversation ended, and Sally looked at her mother with longing and asked, "How can someone lie so skillfully? He's so polite, simply flawless. I wanted to shout that they miscalculated and wouldn't get another penny from me or you. But we need to do everything so as not to let Liv down. Judging by how Lisa can cause trouble for strangers, she won't spare her own daughter. She'll have a bad time if someone guesses that she warned me. I don't want to harm such a sincere, honest girl." Mary understood that Sally wasn't expecting an answer, so she didn't rush to say anything. Indeed, they had to think everything through carefully. The women sat embracing, as if drawing support and strength from each other to withstand the betrayal that had fallen upon them. Finally, Mary began to speak, choosing her words carefully. "I think you shouldn't talk to Al on the phone today. Write a text message saying you're tired, especially since that's the pure truth, and that you'll be waiting for him here, at our place. He's supposed to come tomorrow, Saturday, right?" Sally nodded, and Mary continued to share her plan. "Excellent. So tomorrow morning, you and I will go and deposit the money in the bank. Then I'll ask a colleague to come over as backup. I think if you confidently tell Alex that you can't support him financially anymore, he won't insist or try to influence us in any way. Of course, ideally, we wouldn't bring him home, but meet somewhere in a cafe. Beyond that, I personally see two options. Either immediately shock him with the news that his scheme has been exposed, but then his reaction might be unpredictable. He might even try to fight. A more interesting game would be to have a little fun, lead Al on, lie, for example, that the money was urgently transferred for the treatment of a child seen on television. I think that news would be a terrible blow to him. What do you think?" A wicked fire of anger blazed in Sarah's eyes. "Mom, I have another idea. Remember we had those joke banknotes somewhere, the ones they gave you as a joke for your birthday at work? I propose handing Alex a so-called dummy stack of fake money. I doubt he'll check the authenticity of his winnings in front of us. And when he gets back to his lair with them, I wonder how he'll justify himself to his accomplices. I highly doubt Lisa will believe him if he says he got exactly these papers from me. She thinks I'm a sucker. I think Al is guaranteed to have problems." Mary approved her daughter's plan. "What an idea! I wouldn't have thought of that. But I still absolutely don't want to see him in our apartment. Let's meet him somewhere on the way to the dacha, and you'll give him the supposed money, and we'll go to the dacha. Even if there's no work there now, except maybe packing snow into the tank, I think it will be easier for us in the fresh air. Physical labor will help distract us from our thoughts." Sarah agreed and immediately became sad. "Mum, we probably need to change the locks first thing, just to be safe. Remember, I gave Al a set for both the apartment and the dacha, just in case." The woman instantly responded, "Well done, daughter, you're thinking correctly. I'll call George Howard right now and ask him to help." While Mary was arranging things with her colleague, Sally watched with unexpected joy how sweetly her mother's cheeks blushed during what seemed like a completely serious, not romantic, conversation. Let at least she be lucky in love, the woman thought. Mum deserves to have her day in the sun too. Otherwise, I can't understand where justice is in life at all. It didn't take George Howard long to get to his colleague's apartment, and soon he was dealing with the task at hand. Stealthily observing the working man and her mother, Sally clearly noted that there was a strong mutual liking between them. George Howard didn't refuse dinner in the hospitable apartment either, or to go to the dacha together the next morning. Mary briefly, without details, told him about the upcoming event, and the man said sternly, "The idea is excellent, but still, for the sake of order, I would also file a police report about trust fraud. At least, maybe these swindlers are wanted for other crimes. And in general, even if they aren't held accountable, at least it will get on their nerves, and that's something." After Mary saw off her guest, Sally asked her mother, "Did you notice the way George Howard was looking at you?" The woman blushed noticeably. "Oh, don't be silly. We're just friends. Although, of course, I like him very much, but I've somehow gotten used to living without a man in my space. I even remember with horror what it was like, constantly ironing shirts, looking for matching socks, cooking huge pots. Such a regime of self-sacrifice is only possible when there is love or strong financial motivation." "Why are you looking at me like that, daughter?" Alas, but in the modern world, financial support is excellent fertilizer, you could say. You can quite well grow a happy partnership on it. Forgive me for the gardening comparison. Sally even laughed. Mom, I thought you were a romantic lady, and you're a practical and rational gardener. However, I would strongly advise you to take a closer look at George Howard. Of course, my intuition isn't great, but he seemed very pleasant, sincere, and in love with you." The women carefully thought through all the details of the upcoming prank on the exposed swindler who didn't yet know about his failure, and Sarah began typing a message. Alex's reply wasn't long in coming. "Can't wait for tomorrow. I want to see you so much. Kiss you, my love. Can't wait to see and hug you." "And we can't wait either," Mary chuckled. "This meeting will definitely be unforgettable." Sarah, Mary, and George Howard met beforehand. The man said that he had managed to find out through acquaintances that no work was being done on cars in the burned-down garages. This argument was important so that none of the swindlers would think that someone from Lisa's family had told Sally about the deception. The fighters for justice arrived at the bus stop where the transfer of the fake money was supposed to take place a little earlier. But Al, anticipating a large payoff, also arrived early. He had to park his car a little further away to avoid potential arguments and conflicts with the traffic police. Alex practically ran to his waiting fiancée and her companions. Kindly greeting the stranger, the groom pressed his lips to his fiancée's cheek, kissed Mary's hand, and fortunately didn't notice how the women winced. Then Al received a small package from Sally's hands. "My dear, here's everything Mum and I managed to collect. We simply have nowhere else to get it from unless we put the apartment or the dacha up for sale." Alex again rushed to kiss Mary's hand. "Mary Howard, I appreciate your kindness, but you don't need to make such sacrifices for me, especially since with this sum I can satisfy the main part of the claim. Listen, maybe I should write you a receipt." Calling upon all her self-control, the woman replied, "What are you saying, Alexei? What kind of receipts can there be between close people? You're going to become part of our family. I intend to entrust you with the most precious thing, my only daughter. What are some money compared to her? Consider this our common family budget, and to get you out of trouble, we are ready to give everything we have. Money is just paper compared to your health. And, by the way, ours too. In the notorious 90s, for smaller debts, you could even say goodbye to life. We are absolutely not going to agree to that. So go, settle with those bastards, and come to the dacha. We'll light a small bonfire, boil tea in a kettle, and relax after all these worries." Alex hugged his fiancée, shook George Howard's hand, and hurried to his car. Sarah and Mary, without a word, sighed in unison. They had performed the invented revenge scene with such precision as if they had rehearsed it numerous times. Mary giggled. "I imagine the cursing that will start when those who decided to fleece us find a dummy stack instead of real money." Sally supported her mother. "Exactly. It's a pity we won't be able to see their faces." George Howard, watching his cheerful companions, advised, "Well, to the dacha or to the police station to file a report on this gang?" Mary, exchanging glances with her daughter, voiced the common decision. "To the dacha, of course. We discussed this situation for half the night, looked for similar cases online to understand the prospects of punishment for these trust swindlers. The results weren't very encouraging. Sally transferred the money to a private person voluntarily, without coercion. It will be almost impossible to prove that this Alex deceived my daughter about his difficult situation. So we'll just observe what this Alex says and does when he discovers that the banknotes are fake." The call from Alex came almost immediately after the trio of inventive avengers reached the dacha plot. Sarah answered the call, putting her smartphone on speakerphone. Everyone prepared to listen to the unlucky swindler. "Sally, dear, my love, something unpleasant has happened. Did they give you the money at the bank?" Sally tried to put a note of anxiety in her voice and asked, "Yes, I got the money at the bank branch, the one in the next building on the ground floor. What happened?" Al continued to clarify, "Sally, dear, didn't you and your mum count the money?" The woman's indignation was almost genuine. "Of course. What if there was some technical error, a malfunction with that machine that counts money? We counted everything thoroughly. Then, as I told you, I put everything in the bag that I gave you today. Oh, of course we counted it. First we asked them to seal it with paper. They refused, but they gave us bank rubber bands. Then Mum went to work. She found a side job to still give us a wedding gift. Oh, and I just remembered, I went into a store." A hysterical note sounded in Alex's voice. "Sally, did you leave the bag in a locker?" The woman's indignation was almost real. "Al, do you think I'm completely idiotic? I carried the bag with me inside my jacket so no one could get to it. I bought candy because I always crave sweets when I'm stressed. Then I went home." The interrogation continued. "Could anyone else have gotten into the apartment? Who is that man who was with you today, Mary Howard? And wasn't he at your place after you got the money?" Maintaining composure was becoming increasingly difficult for Sally, but she kept up the act, proving that she hadn't gone to the drama club at school for nothing and had even received several certificates of honor. "Well, actually, my mother trusts George Howard completely. He's her colleague. He was at our place, but he didn't have access to the bag, if that's what you're implying. Al, you're scaring me. What happened?" Alex lost patience and flared up. "What happened? What happened? Instead of real money, the bag contained joke banknotes and rubber papers. So I'm trying to figure out where, at what point, the real banknotes were swapped. Try to remember carefully how this could have happened. You understand how much depends on this. Who could have had access to the bag? Sally was already weeping with laughter, but continued to play along with the arrogant swindler who had fallen into a trap. Oh, what a nightmare! How could this happen, my love? Listen, maybe you could bring me that bag now, and I'll take it to the police. Let them, what do you call it, take fingerprints? How do they do it in the series? Isolate and identify who else touched the bag besides me. Not a sound came from the speaker. It seemed Al was conferring with Lisa and Tom using gestures, and after a few seconds he said, "Listen, I tore the bag to shreds out of anger and confusion. Now probably there won't be anyone's traces there except mine. It's unlikely the police can help, even if they can. It will take them ages to investigate this case. I need to pay off my debt. I promised to pay as much as possible today. Lord, what should I do now?" Sarah, wiping away her tears, replied coldly, "I'll tell you what to do, Al. Forget about me forever, and don't even think about getting revenge by doing nasty things, keeping in mind that I will go to the police and write about the attempted fraud. Do you think it was that hard to check if you worked in the burned-down garage? You didn't even show up there once. So goodbye, Al. Thanks for the lesson. Keep the money I transferred to you for your efforts. You worked on me for a long time, inventively. You've earned it in a way." Towards the end of her speech, Sally's nerves began to give way, and she quickly hung up, not listening to any of Al's justifications, who began shouting that she had simply misunderstood him. With a calm heart, the woman blocked the number of her now definitely ex-fiancé and suggested to her mother and George Howard, "I think we did an excellent job. There's a reason to celebrate the victory of justice and my liberation." Mary added modestly, "Daughter, there's another reason. George Howard and I have decided to get married." At her mother's wedding, Sally met Owen, the nephew of the elegant groom. Communication developed with Mary's full approval. Sally, who now relied unconditionally on her mother's opinion, allowed herself to trust a man again. It wasn't very easy, but life went on, and there was no reason to shut herself off in her loneliness because of the scoundrels she had encountered. 6 months later, Owen proposed to Sally, and she accepted. The story with the vile Lisa and the deceiver Alex remained in the past. The only person the woman wanted to see happy again was Olivia, who had helped her get out of an almost hopeless situation.